Mhm. Greetings, everyone. I am here with Simon Vorster. He is one of our speakers at the upcoming Evolutionary Astrology Conference, October 3rd through the 6th. It's an online virtual conference. If you don't know about that yet, we are here to just have a conversation about outer planetary transits because, Simon, you chose to speak about Uranus and embracing change. And you know what? I'm going to tell everybody a little secret. Your first choice was Pluto, but that was already taken. Lauren Albandian will be talking about Pluto transits. And I mean, I don't know, they're pretty close to each other out there in the universe, and they do have what feels at times like similar impacts. But had you choosing Uranus as your next choice?
Well, for me, I realized how much of my own Pluto transit was impacting my life and how I felt that I could take the insights and the information that I had gotten from EA and just kind of put it into a nice little teaching and say, hey, for everyone that's out there that's going through a Pluto transit, whether it be through your square to your moon, etc., here's a psychological approach that can help you and move through it with the least amount of resistance and suffering. Um, so the only difference is I just right, because that's the thing with Pluto. It knocks at your door and says, "We're going in this direction. Would you like to come along, or should I carry you out?"
My great example is you're standing at the train station and the train comes by and the doors open and you're standing there holding your bags, right? All your baggage from the past. And Pluto's on the train and he just reaches out and grabs you and said, "Nope, you're leaving your baggage here," and just hucks you on the train. I mean,
Yeah,
that's if you're resisting the journey, right? And
yeah,
of course, we want to hold on to those things that are familiar to us, but Pluto doesn't usually let us, well, most of
oh,
the time, never do
that's
that.
right. So when I heard that Pluto was Laura is going to be talking about it, I was like, okay, well, I'll just do the same for Uranus. I mean, to me, I
Oh,
love
yeah.
the outer planets, and at the end of the day, if you can consciously work and embrace the outer planetary experiences in your life, you will find a lot more. There's a possibility for flow. There's a possibility to actually experience the miracles of what it is that these planetary systems are actually doing. And hopefully, by the end of the transit, you don't come out feeling more cynical about your life because these transits, these outer planetary transits, I've seen the impact that it's had on people. And there is no guarantee that these outer planetary transits, like Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, will leave you without any like grief and sadness and loss and things that have caused havoc. So a deep part of my mission is to try to convey a way to orientate towards your natal Uranus and say, okay, through transit, this is what's coming up for you, or this is how you could see it this way, and have an empowering perspective and try to work with Uranus in this case, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about the Pluto and Uranus, the differentiation, at least in my experience, is that the Pluto transit, you're in it. Like, you're in the wave. You're riding this thing. You're hoping you can stay on the board all the way to its fruition. Uranus can be so cold and jarring and unexpected. So it's usually those the earthquake events, and the Pluto transit, at least from my experience, and I've lived through many at this point, deep transits of Pluto, it's you're it's uncomfortable the whole time you're in it because you are peeling away those layers of the conditioning, perceived security, whatever it might be, and you're having to just surrender to that elimination of perceived protection, where
Yes.
Uranus is just that shock. And so um, I wanted to ask you, as we were talking about gathering today, what what are the most influential transits, or maybe one in your life that is so profound that, in hindsight, when we look back at what we might have been through and we're free of the intensity of that transit, and we
Yeah.
can look at it objectively and understand why our soul called it in, then we can uh, really, well, understand why it had to happen, even if if it
Sure.
was something really brutal. Like, why did I have to have that wake up call? Why did I have to have that Zen blow? what was it for you? I mean, it doesn't have to be Uranus, because all the outer planets are really, they're really
Yeah.
big in their influence. So what's the big one for you?
Well, it's difficult for me to put the top three lists because all three of these outer planets have had such a significant impact in my life over the last 10, 11 years. That, when I had my Uranus transit. So I would say that I think Pluto, I'm going to go with Pluto. Uh, Pluto has had the most significant impact in my life. The memory that I recall very distinctly was when Pluto transited my Neptune, just before it went into Capricorn. And I'd immigrated to the UK. I was kind of settling in over there, and I had these kind of grand ideas of what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to go into some form of humanitarian sciences. I wanted to contribute to the continual development of, what humanity was doing with its things, right? Whether it be in, engineering or anything to do with sciences that I just wanted to be participating in that, in whatever field that was. And when Neptune transited my Pluto, sorry, the other way around, when Pluto transited my Neptune and then went to my 12th house, I had like a massive disillusionment. I realized that these ideals, these dreams, these hopes were way out of reach. Because where I came from in a place called Springs is a very small little city, a small little town, and the education that I had was not getting me into universities. That where people would naturally. So the order of how what I wanted to do and how you get to that place, that was not nurtured from a young age. So so that was completely absent. I was like out of my league, out of my depth completely, right? And that experience created an incredibly deep so that affected me a lot. Like I spent a good 6 years of my life completely just disassociated, and I'd lost all meaning
Like
because yeah,
disillusionment.
I mean, that's what it was. It was a deep soul ideal that obviously I carried because I have Pluto and Saturn and the Sun in the 10th. So for me, I'm naturally driven and orientated towards kind of contributing in some way to the way that society functions and structures. So, and that was what I had. And when I came in to realize how society and how natural orders take place, very Capricorn Pluto story, this disillusionment had thrown me back into my emotional world. And at the time, and I think this is the reason why it impacted me so much, and it's actually the reason why I do this work, or a big part of it, is that I didn't have anybody to help me understand the grief that came after the disillusionment. And there wasn't a support structure or context or the container that helped me kind of put this stuff together. And so for a long period of time, just drifting, Neptune, right,
Yeah.
was part of my life. And when eventually I had my Saturn return, I was asked by God, Goddess, whatever, to kind of say, hey, would you want to take a second chance at this thing? Which is when EA came into my life. So I project a lot of meaning into this work because part of me is driven by when people go through Neptune transits or outer planetary transits, I want to, in some way, shape, or form, provide what I felt like I didn't have at the time. And that's actually how that Pluto transits like impacted me deeply, is it drives me to want to provide some form of context or container or conceptualization or understanding or integration for those that will go through big transits like that in their life that their soul's called into,
Yeah.
and to kind of make sense of it so that you don't kind of have some of the regrets that I have, which is I feel like I wasted
Mm.
5 years of my life that I don't know if I did I really need to, but that support structure wasn't around there. And that, I suppose that even speaks to it. So
Well, Jeffrey would always say time is an illusion, and it took you as long as it needed to take you.
mm,
I think about big transits as well, and there was enormous transits when I got into this work as well. And I always think about the Pluto transits when I was 33 and early 30s. That led me to that Easter Sunday lecture on Saturn. Jeffrey Wolf Green was teaching And that was the first moment I heard him say good morning and follow with a talk on Saturn, which I have Saturn squaring the nodes. And so that was not a coincidence. And I was thinking that there were years leading up to that point that I was really suffering like you were, lost. And is this all there is? And what has helped me so much, and I want to convey this to anybody who's doing this work, is there's so much power and impact and looking back in your life and finding those transits, those big, deep, long range transits, and saying, okay, I remember this event when I was in middle school or I was 14. What was going on then? And just going back to that time and overlapping your chart, inevitably you're going to see something major on an outer planetary level. And that, because I got into EA late, I was in my early 30s and not raised with an alternative environment, that's how it proved itself to me, all these transits, these impactful transits. And one thing that I was just recently doing, because every time I think about discovering EA, discovering this work, so much led up to this moment. So when we were talking about what's the most intense transit you've had, I have to say it's kind of a three-way tie. Like,
Yeah.
I think Pluto, Uranus, Saturn all at once, with a little Neptune twist, we'll give that like a topper. But, it's the Saturn return that we come into. And at that time, Neptune was transiting my Mars and Venus. I
Yeah.
did not even realize it till I just looked like a couple days ago. And that followed with Uranus conjunct my Venus. This is all prior to meeting Jeffrey Wolf Green that sacred Sunday, when that door opened, and there was no going back. And so I realized just a few days ago, because I was so fixated on Pluto, that I had them all operating before I even got to Pluto. So it's an interesting study, and to just observe, what was leading you to that Plutonian experience, because it is this long range of, it feels like the universe has its thumb on you the whole time. You are not going to feel comfortable until you get to the bottom of why you are here on this planet, or why this suffering, or why this ending. And so I just, again, I say the three-way tie with a twist, because they were just all operating, and I hadn't realized how big that swell of energy was until, this Pluto period really maxed out in my early 30s.
Yeah.
So they're all operating together. They're all like part of the band, it's just.
That's right. Exactly. It's a beautiful way of understanding the holisticness, that there's not just one thing that's operating individually. There's always other dimensions and other transits and other small little cycles that are contributing to the larger long range cycles. And like in your case, for instance, you were talking about Neptune on Mars, Venus. I mean,
that was my late 20s. I mean, it was just like, whoa, talk about not seeing people clearly. And I have Mars and Venus in Capricorn. And so the type of people that I had been attracting into my life were very Capricornian, Saturnian. And
sure.
I went to UCLA. I was at a mainstream college, and I had a real mainstream kind of reality going
Yeah.
on in every direction. I was playing competitive sports, there's boyfriends in the mix and everything else. And it was just this reality that I'd created that was just the superstructure of what, it was just temporary. It was going to be dissolved inevitably. And so, yeah, that was extremely painful. But I definitely would say that the Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, I'm going to actually share this little image, I've talked about many times. I want to remind people that we're doing Pluto work, right? Simon, and Pluto is at the root. It's at the root of the root chakra, which is where the soul lives. We've got Uranus wrapped around that, which is our vibration, our soul's vibration. And then we have this Saturnian casing, this casing that protects us, like the skin and bones that hold our soul inside to protect us, is Saturn. And so look at these three planets. We got Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, all ruling the root chakra. Now, you talk about, resistance. The more you resist, the more you just get thrown into that. And it's important to understand that, we are working to wear down that outer ring, so more of our essence can be emitted, more of our signal can be sent out to the universe so we can actualize what we came here to do. And so, of course, anytime we have a Pluto transit, a Uranus transit, even Saturn can so bring you to your knees. Now in Pisces, it feels like a Saturn Neptune thing, right? To just really, I would say, take your consciousness down to the root of the bottom of your being, the central source of who you are, and just allow yourself to feel whatever is occurring at this time. And sometimes it is going to be a crisis, which, well, it appears as a crisis. An awakening can appear like a crisis, right? Because it's a dismantling of what is known. And
Exactly.
so anyway, I just wanted to throw up this image that is it's always been so meaningful to me doing this work, when I can understand that Pluto and Uranus are really trying to help us wear down or thin down that outer ring of resistance. So our actual essence, our actual purpose, and for you, going from the scientific, or intentional humanitarian approach to life, which is so meaningful, it really is, but it was actually just a safer way of helping the world. Now you're like working with people that are so vulnerable and raw because of their experiences. You're actually able to help humanity or souls in a timeless way, right? Versus the 10th house way that you were talking about.
I mean, that's what it is, and it's very clearly explained and expressed there. It is, because my Neptune is in opposition to my natal moon exactly. So whenever Pluto was hitting my Neptune, it was also in opposition to my moon, which meant my entire identity, right? And the
Yeah.
emotional security attached to that also was kind of thrown into the chaos dynamic. And
How do you talk to people about if you see a transit of Uranus coming towards somebody's Venus or the moon, or it's a good conversation to have, because knowing what we know or having our eye on things every day, it's like a blessing and a curse, but it doesn't always manifest the same way for everybody. So how would you talk to somebody about an approaching Uranus transit, or Pluto for that matter?
I mean, great, absolutely. I take a little bit of a unconventional approach in some sense. I tend to be very honest about the nature of the planetary system, and I don't try to give it a. I don't try to encourage people to just give the positive side of the transit. What I'm actually interested in is asking the question, well, like we've talked about, why did the soul at this point in time have this phase of their life have this Uranus transit? And before you can even answer that question, you need to go back to the actual reason for the incarnation itself.
Yeah.
So you have to always start with, why am I here? Because once you ask that question and you begin to explore that and have a story that comes from it, all you see with the transit is, here's where I'm at right now on that path, and here's what the next step of my life is going to be like in order to continue that evolutionary desire. So for me, as an example, right, I have Mars and Venus at 16 degrees of Virgo. We all know that Saturn is currently at 16 degrees of Pisces. So I have Saturn in opposition to my Mars and Venus, exact. But I also have my North and South node in Sagittarius and Gemini 16 degrees. So I have essentially the skip steps. And Saturn is now activating that skip step. At the same time that I'm having an exact, I mean, Pluto is literally squaring my Mercury and my Sun. They're like direct, right? And then I actually have Neptune at 27 degrees, and my natal Neptune is at 27 degrees. So you can't make this stuff up, right? It's
Well,
it's
so let
like the
me ask you this.
precision.
How are you experiencing that Saturn transit? We are just talking
Right.
about this a second ago, but I want to know, because Saturn can be so, the gravity of Saturn, and you talked just a bit ago about how did I waste all those years, going in a direction that never manifested in any way. Um, and of course I shared what I shared, that time
Yes.
is an illusion. But how are you experiencing that now, if I can put you on the spot? Because to
Yeah.
have Saturn opposing a Mars and Venus, that's your relationship to everything. It's your desire nature. I mean, what is that about for you?
Well, So kind of maybe just tying in how I would approach somebody with transits, and then using my own direct experience of how I would sort of console myself.
Counsel yourself, console, for sure,
It's
right?
the only thing that I feel is possible. Because I can't say, oh, these transits suck and they need to disappear, right? So that's what I meant when I
You
said
can
I have
say
an
that.
unconventional approach. I'm like, look, your Pluto transit's coming up. This is coming up, and we tend to come into fear. So for me, I know that I understand what the Mars Venus resolution is about, and my Saturn at the moment is giving me a lot to think about in terms of the the way that that skip step has impacted my life. So the weight of Saturn is like, okay, kiddo, you've had Uranus go over that skip step when Uranus was in Pisces. Then you had Neptune go over that over there, and now Saturn's coming along. And my relationship to Saturn said, okay, well, this is reality, right? You've gone through these things, you've got all the healing things. Now you have to embody it. So Saturn asks for consistency every day to make those Mars Venus um, aspects come into reality, so that it becomes anchored in, it becomes crystallized, and I can continue to then move forward with an integrated Mars Venus that my soul came in this lifetime to try and resolve, because it literally is. I mean, my nodes and my Mars and Venus are exact numbers. It's not like my Mars and Venus are 13 and my nodes are at 4 or whatever. It's like 16, 16, 16. So the Saturn for me is definitely asking those very, very kind of practical questions, but on an emotional level, it's asking me the question like, is this what I want to do? Is this where my time wants to be invested? What is the meaning in this? Um, and there are real life examples of this actually taking place within my life that are bringing me into exactly what you said, which was kind of debating like, where is the direction? What do I do? Um, I mean, I can elaborate a little bit further. Like when Pluto was in Capricorn, it was very clear to me that a big part of this Pluto through Capricorn transit was to understand the emotional dynamics of us as a human race, and particularly address where these emotional core wounds exist. But when Pluto went into Aquarius, I almost felt like I had lost what my role was, because it was very evident and clear that as Pluto was going into Aquarius, we were starting to move away from the reparenting dynamic and the attending to the inner child and emotional trauma work, etc. And it was a completely AI was coming in, and I felt like the Gen Z language structure is foreign. I don't know, I can't even relate to them because it just feels like so there was it it has very much impacted my sense of where does my service, Mars and Venus and Virgo, actually have meaning and value
At this time.
at this time. And now I have, like, through my own personal transformation, that's been actually come internally. It hasn't actually come from external. And that's, I think, what we're pointing to is that Pluto transit on my Neptune at the time, plus what you had said about how that event has brought me to a place where the type of work that I'm doing is more sort of the inner emotional connection and soul work. And I think that the only way to solve the problem and the dilemma of what direction do I go with that Saturn on that Mars and Venus cannot come from an external stimuli.
No,
And it can only come from my own personal inner transformation. And that insight made me realize that if I work through my Pluto transit and I do what it is that's necessary, and I kind of just bide my time and pay attention to the things I need to grow within myself, it will naturally catapult me into the next step.
absolutely. Yeah.
This,
So you were born with Pluto at 29 degrees of Libra. This is, we call it
yeah,
the aneretic degree. It's a very powerful degree. It's right before it changes signs. Pluto just backed into Capricorn until November 19th for the last
yeah,
time. It won't be back for almost 250 years. I mean, you've obviously been feeling this transit in a maxed out way, I'm sure, over time, in combination with everything else. Saturn, the Saturn transit that's opposing your Mars and Venus, is the ruler of Pluto and
yes,
Capricorn right now. So this is really impactful time right now.
yeah.
And I was joking with you earlier saying, when's that Uranus opposition coming for you? Because I really remember mine. It was not easy. So you're not even quite there yet, early 40s. But anyway, I think what's important to remember, when I discovered this work, I had lived through many transits I wasn't aware of because I wasn't even into astrology, but I
Yeah.
survived them. I moved through them. You know, I gleaned insights from them and hopefully evolved and matured as a result. And so, but it is nice to have, whether you want to call it the foreknowledge or just the awareness of what they can produce. And so being born with Pluto at the 29th degree, and we're all now moving through this at the 29th degree, how can you talk to us about what it's like to live with that Pluto at in Libra? So much of this is about the relationship dynamics in your life and being in
Yes.
balance and how you give, how you receive, keeping that in balance, knowing when to give and when it's too much. A
Yes.
big part of your journey there.
So a big part of my resolution for my skip steps was, to me, I feel like I'm writing the final exam of the Pluto and Libra generation.
Yeah.
And I joke with myself in the sense that I'm back here because I kind of like was a little bit rebellious with my Aquarius rising and just skipped the final exam. I was like, nah, I've got it. Like all confidence and all sort of like, I got this thing. And then the universe went, sorry, kiddo, but actually there's no, you can't just like pretend that it doesn't exist. So here you come, back here. So I've had to be very patient with Pluto transiting my 12th house, where a lot of my dreams and desires, and this is, I think, as I'm speaking to you, I'm actually finding the clarity. I can feel it emotionally. But I think that the dreams that I had when Pluto conjuncted my Neptune, I was not ready yet emotionally to actually do that. Because the thing that I needed to grow within myself, I know for a fact I wouldn't have been, I didn't have it. So it's almost like it was on pause until I write this final exam, and then I can take that kind of like mark or that sense of emotional growth and then apply it in the next step.
Yeah,
And
you
that's
need
what I'm ready.
the foundation. You need the foundation after
Yeah,
that dissolution.
exactly, exactly. So, and that's been something that I've come to really respect and understand. That actually a big part of it was, hey kiddo, you're not ready yet. And I've had experiences in my life where the early parts of my life were very much like given responsibility, achieve things, and then like it just gets taken away. And I realized a big part of it was because I wasn't ready yet. So that's that Pluto 29 degree, right? It's like it's that moment where I'm ready to take that thing on to achieve that thing. And then the soul's like, yeah, but you've got to go through a couple of exercises first or training regimes first before you're capable of holding that. At least that's how I'm kind of feeling it with inside of myself. So what is it like to live with Pluto 29 degrees? Um, I think the first thing that sticks out for me straight away is at a collective level, is that it's very evident and clear to me that from that moment onwards, like 29 degrees or like 1984 onwards, human beings, like most of those kids that are born, like those adults that are born right 84, 85, 86, 87, they're like 36, 37, 35, and most of them are more aware of their individual needs in relationships than say the generation of us beforehand, primarily because there's been a very clear switch between what is actually balanced and what is not in a relationship. And I think that Pluto through Capricorn squaring all of the Pluto and Libra generation planets had brought up where they needed to find their own sort of imbalance within themselves about how they were raised and what family models that they had seen. So you'll see a lot of Pluto Libras will struggle with the dilemma of mom didn't acknowledge their feelings and dad wasn't around. And so when they get into relationships, they're stuck in this dilemma of don't know how to meet their needs because they weren't shown how to do that. And then they also feel the lack of accountability in relationships. And so these dilemmas play out in their early 30s and 40s. And I've seen them, the ones that I've worked with consciously, have to reframe what it means to be balanced in a relationship. And I'll end off with this. Jeffrey said that the Pluto and Libra generation needed to do their Aries polarity, which was to come in to discover themselves and be okay with being alone. And a lot of Pluto Libras have come to realize that part of their healing was not like denying their needs and their individuality. So that's what I've seen. And
Yeah,
then
also I was just going to add that he would also say that not caring what people think about what you're doing, like not people caring or not care what people do with your new choices, because
Yeah,
people want you to do what you've done. And so the trigger always for that Libra archetype is, what are people going to think? How will they feel about it if I go in this direction or make this choice? There's so much pressure within the soul to not, I don't want to say not care. Of course, we care about the people we love, but to care more about yourself, knowing that this is where you need to go, and then everything else will work
100%
out.
correct. And I've seen that narrative play over. So a big part of my resolution is skip steps, because I grew up in an environment where those dynamics were completely absent, right? Hence the skip steps. So a big part of my own personal work is having to kind of come into that more grounded emotional understanding of what is fair and what is not fair, and what are my needs, and can I say this, and can I express them and not feel complete shame and guilt because I'm allowed to have needs, etc. So that's been what I've witnessed for the last sort of since Pluto's went in Capricorn. But now it's my turn to have to embody it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's written the exams and passed, and I'm like,
Okay, I have a funny question. I have this repeating theme. I think a lot of people have it, but I haven't had it in a while, thank God. But this dream of missing the final exam in college, like literally showing up half dressed, or like oversleeping, and it just followed me into my 40s even. Like, why am I still having this dream? Not
yeah,
getting somewhere on time, yeah, not making it for the final exam, maybe studying all night. I have no idea what that's about, but I know a lot of people have this kind of dream. Like, what do you think what is that about? That's so Neptunian. How do you interpret that one? I don't know.
there's definitely a Neptune element to that process as well. And there's definitely a Capricorn, like an emotional response, like a Capricorn emotional response, like the commitment and the expectation and meeting that and the responsibility behind it. That's definitely there. It's interesting to me that you share that, because the last 2 years of my school, I was busy sharing that with my partner yesterday or the day before, that one of my concerns with my children is that I really want to make sure that when they're at school, they can have the attention of the parent, to make sure that when they go to school and they've, say, had homework, etc., that they feel that they can go there and the teacher's not going to get upset with them because they haven't done it.
Hmm.
And I realized through my own Pluto square that, or these transits, that a big part of that drive for me is because I felt like going to school and not having that structure gave me a lot of anxiety, because I didn't want to get in trouble from the teachers. And the last 2 years of school, right? The last 2 years of school, I mean, this is not who I am, but at the time when Pluto was transiting my South Node, there was a lot of emotional displacement in the family structure. So I was very distracted. And the last 2 years of school, like I mean, I have like fears of coming to that final exam and my books are empty because I didn't attend the classes.
Yeah, notebooks are empty.
Right. And so like, oh, what do I learn from? And I felt it the other day where I was like I'm not prepared enough. I'm not ready enough. Right. It's not, and I think that might be even part of that Pluto square. It's like, oh, I'm not ready to do this final exam. Like I missed out. So
I think
it's,
it's a Saturn opposing your Mars and Venus in Virgo.
yes,
I am not ready. And there's
yes,
this fear of getting in trouble, or fear of not passing the test, or fear of not doing
exactly.
enough. And I think with these big transits, I mean, it is all purely emotion. It's all the growth, it's all internal. There's nothing for us to do out there. Everything that we do in here, it has to start in here for anything to out there to manifest, because like this image on the screen, it's all a vibrational match. And so as we cling, we're fearful, then we're not allowing ourselves to manifest what we want. We want to open the energy field. Surrender is Neptune. And I want to remind you and everybody else that currently Neptune is at 29, Pisces sextiling Pluto at 29 Capricorn. For all of us, it's forming a sextile. And the image I get, and I know Jeffrey wrote about this at one point, I don't remember if it's in the Neptune book or where, maybe you can help me, but the reference is where if you think of the sea as Neptune, right? This limitless, timeless, seamless, eternal energy, and we are like little bubbles in the sea bouncing around. We have structure around our bubble to keep us contained within the sea, and the sense of separateness, it reminds me of something carbonated coming to the surface. So
Yeah.
he talks about the bubble at the bottom of the sea, kind of rising up through our consciousness, and then it surfaces and it can pop, when it reaches the
Yeah.
surface. But the rising to the surface, and then realizing what is now becoming clear with Pluto sextiling your Neptune, there's something that through this transit, the things that were so foggy and uncertain, and maybe this inner feeling of being lost and not clear about the way forward, through this transit, there can be a rising to the surface and an awareness that you haven't had before. And hopefully it represents a rising within you and a rising within the world, and something that you can look back and say, wow, that's a turn I'm going to be proud of making.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, like as soon as this Pluto finishes the square, it goes onto my ascendant and then into my first house, and then it's done. And
What degree is your ascendant?
pardon,
What degree is your ascendant?
4 degrees of Aquarius.
Oh, wow,
So,
that's coming. Yeah, that's coming.
right. And what was it? Where Pluto, when I was born, Pluto's at 29 degrees of Libra, and so it hit my sun sign as it progressed, like to 2 degrees of Scorpio, then it hit Saturn, then it hit my Uranus, then my South Node, then Jupiter, then Neptune, and then it's going to finish out in the 12th house and then come into the first. And I think that I'm kind of, I know that looking back at those transits, I've seen the story play out, and I can also see that each of those stories and each of those activations are aspects of what the lessons are that I needed to go through in order to come to that point where Pluto enters my first house and says, okay, kiddo, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
let's
go do
go,
that
Simon.
thing.
You
Right.
may not even recognize yourself, Simon.
No, it feels like that is happening.
Yeah, and I think, this is why the Pluto transits are so slow. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, with Capricorn coming into Aquarius. As a collective, we're all going to need to bend and to break free into new territory or break new ground, to objectify things more than or to try new things, to come in through the side door, to allow ourselves to be free of the old ways, because we really do need to move forward in a new way. For all of us, we need that.
Yeah.
And
So that,
ultimately, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I wanted to touch on what I've realized today in the new moon video that I did, that Chiron was actually squaring Pluto.
Mm,
And to me, that was a very profound insight. That was exactly what you were saying, right? There's this kind of a collective necessity for us to move beyond the wounds of the past. And part of that will require a very Capricorn, an Aquarius type of perspective. It's not going
yes.
to be easy, but it is a task that if we take on, I think there's, yeah, like you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I want to remind people again of the fact that not all these transits are going to mean the same thing for everyone. Uh,
Exactly.
and I have a memory of working with a client who had Pluto transiting her Mars, and she woke up one day and her partner had passed next to her, and she was, he was in his 50s, early 50s. And I had that same transit approaching my Mars. So you can imagine, as an astrologer, I'm thinking, oh my God, like, is this going to happen to me? Not knowing what with Pluto or Uranus, we don't know what's in store. And I even had Mars in my house I have it in my house of relationships. So I'm like, something's going to end. Somebody's going to die. Like, and as much as I want to just surrender to what has to be or it needs to be, it was always in the back of my mind. And guess what? Nobody died
Mm.
during my
Yeah.
transit Pluto over my Mars, and Mars rules my moon in Aries. So I'm thinking my family, I'm like just
Sure.
completely, and it was such a lesson, Simon, because yes, I did feel like I was use this expression, dying a little more every day. The old
Yeah.
dying, like I'm happy when the old dies away, when I don't attach to outcomes, I just attach to the truth of what's best in the situation. It is so freeing to not attach, which is, a Venus thing. In the 7th house, as I mentioned, this Mars is sitting. So I think it did help me, even though it haunted me at the same time. It helped me to say, wow, this happened for this soul and so tragic. But it may not happen for me. I hope it doesn't happen for me. I hope that's not my path, but I have to just trust that whatever trust Pluto, we have to trust that our soul is just creating it all and calling it all in. So that was a really powerful teaching for me. So when
Yeah.
I'm helping other clients, I can say, hey, yeah, things are going to end and you're going to be celebrating a lot of the things that do. You're going to be feeling more empowered because you're leaving what you've collected or what has weighed you down. You're going to feel lighter because of it on the other side. While you're in it, it may not feel so good. Usually it doesn't. So that was really important for me to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what's so powerful about your message and what you're saying there to highlight is that, and it's kind of almost a Uranians thing as well, is that the Mars on a piece of paper with Pluto approaching it, right, is exactly that. It's just Mars approaching Pluto. The actual reality of it is that you, the person, has an individual story and emotional journey that is connected to that. Those symbols are simply just mirroring back to you a set of archetypes that will play out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's your story, right? That the soul itself has its own journey. And for that lady, she might have lots of Scorpio planets, or that this might be a memory recall from prior life dynamics, like, and so there's Uranus tends to kind of speak to, well, it speaks to, as you've got here in this image, right? There's an individual memory field that is wrapped around the soul, and there's just because a transit's coming up doesn't mean that, like you said earlier, and right now, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen to you, because you have a different story. You've come here to resolve different things. You have different desires. So it having somebody pass away next to you has nothing to do with your desire nature, because that's not the journey you're on. And it's
Right.
a very important perspective to have when we're looking at our charts, that the two-dimensional picture, or when we're looking at it from like when we're thinking about our charts, the attention should be on what is the story that is alive within me, and how does this chart kind of open me up to even understanding it more, right?
Yeah. So Uranus just went retrograde, right? Just
Yes.
stationed retrograde in Taurus, which is about survival and what holds meaning and value to all of us. So I just like to touch upon this before, we finish our time together with Uranus retrograde for all of us collectively. If you have it natally, Uranus retrograde, there can be tripwires that you move through that activate past life memories, because Uranus connects to the long-term memories that are held in the subconscious, or held in the cells of our being. Every memory that we have from every lifetime is held and contained Saturn, contained here within our vibration, our nervous system, all of it. And so the tripwire can be something so subtle, so simple. You could see something on the news, you could have an experience out in the world, and it can literally trigger the past, lifetimes ago kind of past. The nervous system can get ramped up. We can feel panic, anxiety. It's so important to understand when these things happen that this will not happen in this lifetime. This is triggering something really old. And we have to re-enter the fracture. Jeffrey taught, often we have to re-enter the fracture in order to heal it. And so we have to be thrown back into the experience on a physiological, emotional level in order to move through it. Because with Uranus, the tendency is to want to freeze and to hold our breath until it's over. We have to exhale. We have to breathe through it. We have to melt into it. We have to become it. We have to allow ourselves to reconnect all the circuits within ourselves that created the short circuiting to begin with. So, I think even if you don't have Uranus retrograde natally, through this transit, we will be observing it collectively. Do you have it retrograde natally? I don't
No,
know. Okay, I
don't.
don't either. But any client that I talk to who has Uranus retrograde natally, we spend time here. We spend
Yeah.
time. What house is it in? What aspects is it making? What are you afraid of? What is your biggest fear? And then talking about that and letting them sit in that fear and holding their hand through it if need be, I think is important. How do you see this Uranus retrograde transit for us all for months now to come?
part of the way that I see Uranus and Taurus particularly is that Uranus clearly wants to open up dialogues, conversations, our energy field to explore where our survival mechanisms of the past have become redundant and outdated. And so a part of, I think, seeing Uranus and Taurus retrograde is the sort of consensus public sector industries that are very much about what climate change is or energy grids, etc. I think it's gonna impact it quite a lot because we're gonna sort of Uranus is gonna bring information to us that we may have not understood over the last couple of months that it's been there. So the continuous work around humanity trying to find more efficient and better ways of understanding energy distribution and how that works, I think Uranus retrograde is going to impact that a lot. And I think there will be some changes coming along with that. Internally for people, two things. I pay a lot of attention to the Pluto Scorpio generation, primarily because their Pluto is in Scorpio and Uranus has been making an opposition to that. And I very much remember my Uranus transit my Pluto. So I see Uranus in opposition to this generation with their Plutos at 27, 26, and 28 degrees, what's happening within the life. And what's shown up for me is that the very thing that I've gone through with my Pluto at 29 degree Libra, well, the Pluto and Scorpio generation are having that late degrees, they're having their sort of like mastery lessons as well. And very much of it has to do with humanity moving closer to the recognition of the body. So you'll see a lot more people are prioritizing their health, prioritizing their physique in a way that's more stronger. We are the information that is available in terms of how to eat, how the body operates when we're eating at certain times, what happens when we have sleep. It's just very, very present wherever. And I think that Uranus is giving humanity an opportunity to understand that longevity is not something that is now, if you get to 40, your life's over. You see a lot of people. I mean, I saw somebody at the age of like 75, like doing handstands and planks, and she was as strong as anything. And it's like there are the only limitations that we have around our body strength and our capacity to be healthy and live more conscious lives from 50 onwards is those were limitations. And I've watched 60-year-olds go from sitting on the floor with their butt to putting themselves standing up just using their legs because they've realized that just because you're older doesn't mean that you can't strengthen your legs. And now it's like, so it's shattering a lot of myths around how we as human beings have understand age. That's what I've seen, and that's what I will continue to get. Like, we're just seeing the kind of maturation of us making so advancements. I mean, there's one dude that's like 44 years old, for instance. He looks 19 because people are cutting out alcohol. They're choosing to prioritize their sleep. They're realizing this. It's like we're prioritizing the temple of the body as and healing that, rather than the kind of disassociation and that we've had from the body because of the past and how we've not understood it and prioritized it. So
It's like putting a
yeah,
new light bulb into a light, we're rejuvenating everything.
right.
And it really can bring about such an accelerated experience of youth, even.
Yes.
Aging in reverse, we talk about with even the Capricorn archetype with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. But
So
yeah, I love that. I mean, you can extend the life. A lot of people are living longer. They're learning how to do things naturally that allow for that. And it's important too to remember that every planetary transit, even when it's in stress, there's a light and a shadow to the experience. It's not going to always be all bad, and it's never all good. We know that. Um, but yeah, it's just to understand that there are real benefits to a Saturn transit, for example, that you're going through, addressing those skip steps, that sustained focus to recreate the structure or to bring it down to the foundation, to rebuild at this point in time because of where you are in time. And the things
yes.
that held meaning and value to us years ago aren't going to mean the same thing today. With Uranus retrograde and Taurus, we have new things that allow us to be excited about our path and to
Yes.
feel good about who we are as souls on this journey to collect with other people, not collect, to connect with other people of like mind, and to share the things that mean the most to us. So, well, a lot of us really, when we see the big daddies coming, these big transits, we can all hold our breath a little and wonder. But it's important to also, keep the blinds, the windows, the doors open to invite in the maximum benefit, the awakening, the empowerment, the sense of maturation because of what you've been through. All these things are important, and ultimately to elevate our consciousness so we can see the bigger view with a greater sense of awareness and understanding. That is why we are.
Exactly. I mean, that is literally the epitome of the outer planets, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to remember those things, but ultimately, I know you can speak for this too, Simon, that on the other side of the transit is really when you feel what it has done to you within yourself. You can feel it. It's palpable at that point on the other side. And even when you're not even free from it, but you're in a waning aspect, we call it, right? It's not waxing anymore through transit, it's waning. And then we're like, wow, rear view mirror, I can see it now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I want to stop this share and also just bring us to the website. Simon's going to be joining us talking about the Uranus transits. And we have many wonderful lectures. David Green's going to be talking about why we choose our family. That is a very powerful lecture. I already know what that's going to be about, looking at past life dynamics. Planet sign house synthesis with Bradley, Steve Wolfson, involution prior to evolution. That is so Plutonian. There you are, Simon. And of course, Laura doing a Pluto transit facing our shadow. Super excited about Timothy Halloran joining us, a new speaker to our conference about the 12th house and all that brings. Cassandra with Jordan Smith, big topic right now with a lot of my clients, recovering our voice. Evolutionary astrology and sexual healing with Jason Hawley. I'm doing a Mars lecture and how our desires evolve through time and lead us into our evolutionary journey. Ari with Venus, tending to the inner garden of the soul. We've got this health crisis talk with Beth Strzelecki. Super excited, a new speaker at our conference. And we all know this, right? When we go through something health-related and how it can be a catalyst for our healing. What is it on a physical level that is telling us we need to pay attention somewhere? All disease is rooted in emotional unrest, and she's a master with this material. Karma yoga with Rav, and of course Rose Marcus doing a progress chart talk. I'm super excited about that. And Kim Marie is going to discuss the election in the U.S. So much going on here in this country. Simon,
That's
you were
right.
far away. And then of course Patricia Walsh doing unveiling the psyche and looking more into this karma trauma journey through time topic that we're just living in on a repeated basis, all of us evolving together on the planet. So thank you for just sharing a space with me. It's been a while, Simon. We used to teach together looking at Saturn through the houses and signs. Do you remember that?
I do.
And here we are talking while Saturn's opposing your Mars and Venus in Virgo. And it's opposing my Pluto Virgo. So we have
that's right.
And I do feel we're all at a transition point, and Saturn asks us, how do you want to spend your time now moving forward?
Yeah.
How do you want to spend your time today? Well, we hope that you're all going to spend your time at our conference, October 26th.
Exactly.
Come together as a community. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to your lecture at that time, Simon. Thank you for the work you're doing, and just really being true to it. I love it, and we'll see you in October.
Yes, indeed. Amazing. Thanks very much.
Okay. Namaste. Until next time.